available to this committee if requested. The other part? There were 2 questions?
Yes. Yes, through Chair. There is also another question of what measures have you put in place to maintain the profitability of the company going forward, having recorded some profit in 2019 and 2021 respectively.
Okay. So besides the measures that I've already talked to,
I think I'd like to, just in the interest of time, Honorable Cassandra, I think this question comes at the tail end of him having responded to the fact that there are some measures they put in place, including getting rid of obsolete assets. And I think some of those are the measures. So unless there are many others which you want to put, which you didn't, I would rather we skip that point and we move to other issues that you needed to respond to. Otherwise, that has been responded to. We are aware of the measures that you put in place for now. What you just may need to clarify is your submission is in conflict with what the Director of Finance has submitted, especially in terms of the performance in 2022. Because we are looking at a period in 2021 where you had made some profits, and then in 2022 we are asking on how you are performing in 2022. He answered about the working capital, which he says it has dwindled, but then I don't know then if you're struggling with the working capital, how the overall performance would be favorable in 2022. So we just need to, probably you need the indulgence of the Director of Finance to give you highlights, to give the committee highlights of the 2022, what is expected of the financials of 2022, and that would actually respond to our query here in full.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think in terms of submissions, we are aligned. You remember, Chair, I mentioned at the beginning that because of the Chambeshi accident that we had, the revenues for the year 2022 were severely impacted because of that. But yes, like you have guided, I think the finance manager can come in and amplify.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think through my permanent secretary. Okay, in terms of losses, when you go to look at the statement of equity, you'll find that even if we made some profits in the year 2019 and 2020, their levels were not so material so as to be able to actually reflect the positive in terms of accumulated losses. Because if you go into that statement where we bury all the provisions and what have you, you find that if we subtract the profits that we made, we would still just have a small impact where the profits will reduce the levels of the retained or accumulated losses. So that is where that is what the position is. Now, in terms of looking at 2022, where are we? I think, like I stated earlier, it is the projections are showing that basically you'll be able to incur a loss, because what it is that from what my peers have submitted, the amount of revenues which were expected to be realized both from our own operations and then also from the access operators basically evaporated. So we'll be definitely incurring a loss during this period.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Honorable Kasandwe, does that answer your query? I would like to move to the next segment, operational matters, inadequate locomotive coaches. Honorable Mazoka.
Thank you, Chair. From page 191 of the Auditor General's report, arises a query on your operational matters, specifically inadequate locomotive and
Maybe I can
coaches.
guide if you can just directly ask the questions, those bullets, huh? Just directly the bullets.
Okay.
I think the story is well known from
Okay.
there. Yes.
Well, how have the short-term measures helped to improve the availability of locomotives and coaches? And also, what plan has the authority put up to address the scarcity of the spares in order to reduce the high maintenance cost? Thank you.
Okay. The question is understood. You know the context, right? It's about the lack of locomotives. And there are a few measures you put in place. You already belabored the point of why we are where we are. So we didn't need to go through the narrative. But then there are these measures you've put in place. So if you can respond to that.
Chair, I think like the finance manager had indicated, these measures, in as much as they've had some positive impact, like in 2019-2020 financial year, overall they are insignificant in terms of the accumulated losses if we're to compare between the two. And that means that at the end of the day, the authority remained with no capital that they could actually use in terms of revamping additional locomotives. So there was no significant impact in that respect. Then you could help me with the last question again?
What plan has the authority put up to address the scarcity of spares in order to reduce the high maintenance costs?
Okay. Now, I think this one is in relation to the capitalization that the two shareholders had earlier committed themselves to. And in that respect, there was the intention was to bring the 19 locomotives into maintainable and workable state. And so obtaining of spares would have related to that. But maybe for the details, let me ask management through the MD to just amplify on that.
Okay.
Chair, in terms of specific details, that the funding for that hasn't come up. We have the materials that we need to revamp these, and this was dependent on receiving the money from the GRZ for us to purchase that. GRZ was giving us the money in bits, $1.25 million every quarter or so. Just note that one traction motor costs about $60,000 to $70,000. So even with that injection, you are not able to buy this component. And this component, you need 6 of those for one locomotive. Therefore, even the plans that we had to improve on availability of locomotives have not actually been attained.
Okay, Honorable Kampiongo.
Thank you, Chair. We understand, through you, we understand that the equipment or the locomotives and the wagons were gotten from China. And when you say the scarcity of spares, does it mean your source has stopped manufacturing these spares? And you, as you respond to that, you had a full-fledged workshop in Mpika, I think, where your headquarters is, where you were doing a lot of work, a lot of metal fabrication, where you had, technical expertise to even do modifications where you needed. What has happened to that?
Permanent Secretary, kindly respond to that.
Chair, I'll let the MD answer that one.
MD.
Thank you very much. And you've got it right on the button. Unfortunately, even the equipment in both our workshops in Mpika and in Dar es Salaam are obsolete. They are obsolete. For the coaches, for example, it's very difficult to purchase, to find those spares. They are 30, 40 years old. They are obsolete. The manufacturers of those components are gone. They are not there. You can't find them. That is the challenge that we have. We have equipment that the locomotives are from America. The wagons are from China. For the locomotives, it's a function of having the funds. The spares are there. For the coaches, it's very difficult to get the spares. And our appeal, of course, in the revitalization, is to have new coaches supplied other than to attempt to continue repairing them. Thank you.
I think it's very clear, honorable members. I'd like to move to the next segment. Honorable Nyamba, quickly. Failure to meet production targets.
Thank you, Chair.
Mununga Quarry Mpika. In Mpika.
I need your guidance, Chair. I could hear the controlling officer to say this Mununga is one of those properties to be sold to raise the capital. Don't know whether this is the strategic alliance that they entered into in January 2018 with PPP. If it is still standing, then I can go on with the query from the Auditor General.
So this, maybe it's just about us getting an update. Did he submit about the status of this in terms of getting rid of it?
Chair, we are not getting rid of Mununga. What we are doing is trying to get a private operator to come and run the asset on behalf of Tazara. And there will be a revenue to be raised from there. There was a PPP that had been entered into, the 2018.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that PPP, the people that were identified, or the company that was given, proved incapable of executing the PPP. So as a board, the management were given directives to say, get rid of that PPP and go into a fresh one. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Then I come up with controlling officer with, do they have, are you going ahead with the plan to re-advertise the tender for PP to be entered into? Thank you, Chair.
In short, what is ahead?
Yes, Chair. The honourable member is correct. Management were given instructions by the board that they should go ahead and advertise for a new PPP. I submit.
Okay. Honorable Musumali, there is also the quarry at Mbeya.
Thank you very much, Chair. Though this question has been taken over by events, so and in the interest of time, I think we wanted to know when the Council of Ministers will actualize the revitalization of the whatever that they have already been reviewed. Now, I've been told that the Council of Ministers met on Tuesday. So this what I wanted to ask first off. We just await the progress, the outcome from the Council of Ministers. Thank you very much. But maybe of concern, maybe I'll ask the last question because I had three. The position to provide the report on the production of concrete sleepers at this quarry, the Mbeya quarry. You had a target of 24,906 reinforced concrete sleepers, but you only produced 6,240, which was about 25% of the total target. Though you have got a capacity, this quarry has got a capacity to produce 60,000 reinforced concrete sleepers per annum. What measures could the authority implement or intend to implement to to ensure that avoidable accidents are minimized and subsequently cause minimal loss of revenue. Of course, this is referring to the sleepers. So if you are producing inadequate sleepers, the chances of having train accidents will be more. Maybe you can shed light on that. What measures are you taking put in place in order to minimize train accidents as a result of low production of the sleepers? I submit, Chair.
Okay. The controlling officer can respond to that.
Chair, I'll let the MD take that as well.
MD.
Chair, through my PS, yes, indeed, we produced at about 25%, and the reason is that we had a challenge of materials. The concrete sleeper is not just a concrete block. It has inputs of cement. It has inputs of strengthening wires, bolt spikes, which we have to buy from China, and we didn't have sufficient funds to purchase this. Again, this is because of the challenge of working capital and lack of liquidity due to the Chambeshi Bridge failure. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Honorable Kampiongo, wasteful expenditure on avoidable accidents.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. And before just I pause that one, Chair, I just wanted to find out from the controlling officer and Tazara. Those quarries, both the one in Mbeya and the one in Mununga, were basically established to supplement, to provide materials for the rail and ensure that the rail line is maintained. But they have also potential for you to generate revenue. You know, they're strategically pressed to the extent that you can generate revenue away from the material support to the operations of Tazara. What has happened in the past? Did you ignore that potential aspect of diversifying in terms of business for those two quarries? And whilst you are, before you on that, my colleague was talking about some accidents that have occurred, which you have also spoken to in your submission. And truly, some of them could be avoidable. We can understand accidents such as the one you had on Chambeshi, also, which took too much time. I think the only other time we had such a disruption was when that bridge was destroyed by the fellows from Rhodesia, when they collapsed both bridges at that crossing point. What do you have to show this committee that you are compliant in terms of minimum standards of safety? And UPS, coming from the transport sector, you know, the aspects of safety should be paramount, even the maintaining of the rail line. And maybe lastly, the measures that you have put in place in order to avoid these accidents that have ended up derailing your operations and thereby ending the company carrying wasteful expenditure in the process. Thank you, Chairperson.
Controlling officer, may respond to that.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think the MD will come in to supplement, but just to agree with the Honourable Member of Parliament, Honourable Kampiongo, that these quarries indeed do have potential to not only supply Tazara, but even for other works that require aggregate. And on the Zambian side, we do take note of the fact that we have a lot of roads that need to be worked on, and stone aggregate is one of the inputs that is required into that. So the Mununga quarry, once it becomes operational, would come in very handy in terms of giving supply for that. In terms of compliancy to the minimum safety standards to assure safety on our rails. In our report, Chair, we had indicated some of the measures that management has actually put in place, which includes line maintenance, as well as dealing with the human or behavioral aspects of the locomotive drivers. But like I said, I'll let the MD come in and just supplement what I've said. MD.
Okay, MD.
Thank you. Thank you, PS. On the quarry, indeed, yes, the quarry can produce aggregates, can produce quarry dust, which can be sold, which is sold. It does produce even, which is sold to the public. If you notice in the report, the Kongolo quarry produces around about 3,000 tons of material, whilst the Kongolo quarry produces around about 64,000. The reason is very simple. The government of Tanzania gave Tazara money to purchase a drill rig, to purchase dump trucks, to purchase the equipment required for producing this. It was at the same level as Mununga Quarry, but by the injection of these funds for us to purchase this, it has gone up. And Mununga Quarry and Kongolo Quarry does produce all these materials, and we do sell and we do make a bit of money out of that from the public. On the Mununga Quarry, unfortunately, we haven't had the similar type of funding, hence our going into PPP. On the safety, we have sensitization seminars by our safety department that goes along the line to speak to the workers, sensitize them, and also we have alcohol testing, because at times such behaviors are as a result of alcohol. So we have alcohol testing that has been put in place to test the drivers and the crews before they take the trains. Thank you.
Okay, honorable members, I would like to move to the next questions. Procurement matters. Honorable Musumali.
Thank you very much, Chair. Controlling officer, this is a matter whereby you were procuring goods and services with an expiry contract. What measures has the authority implemented to ensure that procurement manual is adhered to, and that in future the authority does not enter into transactions without contracts? I've asked this direct question in recognition that you have noted the Auditor General's query with regret, and you have apologized. But going forward, what measures have you put in place that such procurements cannot occur without a valid contract?
Thank you so much, Honorable Msumari. Indeed, I think there was a gap in terms of contract management as far as the two contracts that have been cited are concerned, because management should have been able to pick these contracts before they expired and if effected the renewal process so that is in order. The people that were involved in this transaction, Honorable Chair, were actually sanctioned, and being first offenders, they got away with a warning. Management is actually following the documents to ensure that these guidelines are adhered to, and I think through being able to sensitize staff in terms of the contents of the procedure manuals so that they follow them, that should help us avoid this. But I'll ask MD to come in. MD.
Yeah, indeed, there was a slip on our side that we allowed this to expire whilst the people were still operating. And just like my PS has said, we've sanctioned the officers, and we have to make sure that our contracts officer follows on all the contracts that we have in terms of execution and validity. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Honorable Musumali, if you can proceed.
Chair, uncompetitive procurement, which has got a recipe for not obtaining value for money. This committee has noted your submissions. However, would like to know what control measures you have introduced to ensure that going forward there won't be any repeat of uncompetitive procurement made. Then we also want to know the name of the Lusaka area non-office who was indicated to have been charged in your memorandum, because you have just indicated the name of the officer in Dar es Salaam, while you have omitted the name of the officer who was Lusaka based. According to your appendices at 4, dated 23 July 2022. I'd like to know the way forward in how you are going to be mitigating this uncompetitive procurement, which has got the recipe of you not getting value for money, especially that you are bemoaning the lack of funds, and yet you are not following the procedure according to the procurement manuals. I thank you, Chair.
Okay, controlling officer, respond to that.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think, like we can clearly see, the manuals or controls that are supposed to be enforced, spelled out in the manuals, are actually there. The problem that is there is on the issue of management ensuring that they are enforcing what the procedure manuals spell out, and I think that's where the lapse came from. So it's incumbent on management to ensure that these manuals are being used and should not just be kept as documents on the shelf. People should be familiar with the contents of the manual so that they are able to follow them. In terms of the names of the individual in Lusaka, I'll ask MD.
Thank you so much. The name of the individual is Splendor Mwemba. Mwemba. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, there's a request for additional information from the finance manager.
Yes, please. Finance manager.
Thank you. Thank you through my PS. Well, I think why we wrote that letter like that is because we had the area manager who was in charge at that particular time, whose name was Madam Rhoda Nyirenda. Unfortunately, she passed on. So this lady, Splendor, just came to act in the position. So we thought that it would be unfair to charge somebody who was not actually in charge. So in order to just keep a reminder, that's why we had to charge the office, so that she will know that Lusaka office have this challenge of ensuring that the procurement manuals are basically adhered to. So that's why we did that, and that's why the name does not actually appear there, because she's late. I submit.
Okay. I can move on to the next. Honorable Mapani has left. Unaccounted for stores. We have a few questions which are based on page 194 of the report of the Auditor General. Controlling officer, what form of evidence can you present before this committee to show that the cited items have been accounted for properly in line with the procurement and supplies manual? This is about the unaccounted for stores. And we also want you to submit to the committee what control mechanism has been put in place by the authority to prevent such from reoccurring in future, apart from warning the officers. Of course, the warning officers is one thing, but putting in measures to ensure that this does not recur probably would call for systems. That's about the unaccounted for stores. Bullet answers just about this.
Chair, like I had said earlier, it's the enforcement of what the procedure manuals say, because clearly the procedure manuals do spell how procurements are supposed to be handled. When goods are delivered, there should be a goods received note issued. When goods are being requested from the store for use, there should be a requisition, and there should also be what I might call a retirement on site once the goods have been used. And clearly this procedure had been omitted in this case because of what was perceived to be an urgent matter. Now, a proper control environment should not distinguish between urgency or non-urgency. I think procedure is supposed to be followed at all times. I submit, Chair.
Okay, so MD, are you satisfied with current status of situation now in terms of how stores are being managed?
Chair, generally these are followed, but in this particular case, we in fact intended to not to proceed with the Women's Day celebration due to lack of funds. But at the last minute, we got some funds, and we're already late for the function. Hence the shortcut. But indeed, the systems are there, and the systems are followed generally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Failure to collect rentals. You're renting out some of the properties, and the Auditor General raised an issue there. So, what is the current status on the board paper to have the receivables? I think the board's approval to have the receivables written off. What's the current status?
This has yet to be given to the board. We have a board meeting coming up in April. That's where it's going to be presented.
Are these really receivables that have gone really bad to a point where you can't recover them? What's the situation like, especially these ones for the rentals?
Chair, these are really bad and really old. They are way over 5 years. There are small companies that were renting the offices at our main office here in Lusaka. Some of them have completely ceased operation, and they are not traceable. Very difficult to trace.
Okay, I'm aware of that. Of course, you see some properties. I'm sure through performance of a FIFA. And are you able to give off cuff how much you realize from sale of those assets?
Thank you. Through my PS, we are yet to dispose of those items.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's fair enough. Now, how are you dealing with the current tenants to ensure that this does not recur? The tenants agreements, how enforceable are they? And how strictly are you following your tenants agreements? Or should I say, do you have a system which gives you the red light whenever a tenant is overdue? Or have you embedded in your tenants agreements some system of receiving payment well in advance before consumption of the service?
We do have a contracts officer whom we employed specifically to be looking at all these contracts. I think what is required is to ensure that this is being done on a regular basis,
on a regular basis,
on
yes.
a quarterly basis. They go through the validity of the contracts and look at the payments.
I think the finance person would give us some insight. We need that comfort to say that something is really going on. It's much of your interest as well, because the debtors book would be swelling if it's not managed. So how does it look as at now in terms of the tenants?
Thank you. Through my PS, just as what my MD has said, I think what we lacked was the establishment of a contracts management unit, because there was a particular time when we didn't have this one. So basically it's like this was left out to every head of that particular place to basically be able to monitor how the payments are flowing. But since the establishment of the contracts office, I think it has improved in that this person is able to quickly follow up and alert us that, okay, there is this contract, this person has not paid, and if he has not paid, we write reminders. If that person persists in non-payment, then we take the necessary measures by jacking them out or taking legal action. So there is an improvement on that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and now that you know that this issue comes up in the Auditor General, so you need to look at it in that way. As you handle these issues, without attending to it, it will definitely come up again in the Auditor General's report. So it should be a matter of your interest. Okay, I'll move to the next segment of questions. That is administrative matters, isn't it? Failure to secure title deeds. Honorable Kampiongo, if you can take us through that one.
Thank you so much, Chair. Controlling Officer, I will take you to I will draw your attention to the audit query which was raised on page 195 regarding the failure to secure title deeds. You did mention in your submission that you have managed to secure title deeds for some properties. Why has it taken so long to secure title deeds for the remaining properties? And whilst you're on that, maybe you can also share with us what you are doing in form of maybe a legal action to be taken against those that are encroaching in the Tazara land. And you being in existence, Tazara being in existence for a long, long time, this shouldn't have been an issue to be dealing with in terms of audit queries this year, 2022. And maybe you can also further highlight on the status of the remaining properties. Thank you so much, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, the MD will come in to amplify, but one of the challenges that Tazara encountered was to the extent that initially the rail reserve was 30 meters, and then this was extended to 50 meters. So by extension, there are some properties that initially were out of the rail reserve, but then they found themselves in the reserve when that extension was made from 30 to 50 meters, and that is something that management has to deal with. In terms of why it has taken long for Tazara to finalize the issue of the title deeds, it's also related to the same issue of setting the beacons and the fact that financing, because of the challenges Tazara has been having, has been a problem in this respect. Like I said, Chair, I think I'll let MD come in and just amplify. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. Chair, in terms of the title deeds, the challenge has been that of financing, to finance surveyors, etc., in order for them to finalize on the title deeds. On the encroachments, it's It's we 1,860 kilometers of line, 1,860 kilometers of line, and you have to make beacons for all these areas, 200 meters apart. That also costs money, but we are in process of making the slabs for for putting into the beacons.
Sorry. Yes, Honorable Kampyongo.
Chair, maybe just to, I've gotten the explanation from the PS and the MD. But we saw also that you offloaded most of your properties, especially the housing units, to your former members of staff. Some of them saving, and that land was sitting on Tazara land, if I'm not mistaken. Why didn't you see it prudent to utilize some of the revenue you collected from those properties to ensure that you secured the remaining property?
Chair, yes, indeed. You recall there was a time when in Zambia we were instructed to sell the units to the sitting tenants, and the thought of using that money directly into getting title deeds for the remaining property didn't cross our mind. Maybe we should have, with hindsight, maybe we should have done that. But you also be aware that the amounts that we were getting from this sale of houses was very minimal. It was the exercise was to enable the Zambians to own some properties, not so much as a revenue generation exercise.
Thank you very much, Managing Director. Honorable Chibuye, is there anything, Honorable Kampyongo?
No.
You are done. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. My question, Controlling Officer, is derived from page 196 of the report of the Auditor Generals. And this is to do with cutting and sowing of overgrown eucalyptus and pine trees, which is questionable engagement. Controlling Officer, whereas 6 bids were received for this contract, 3 shortlisted, and out of 3, you eventually picked on 1 individual who did not meet the criteria, as he was not registered for tax with ZRA and did not have a PACRA certificate of registration and did not indeed propose the sharing ratio, rendering the engagement questionable. Now, this was awarded by the procuring committee. My question is, what assurance is the authority giving the committee that such oversights will not happen again going forward? And 2, was in the engagement approval by the procurement committee, how many members of the procurement committee were being disciplined for this lapse? What assurance are you giving the committee, and what is the procurement committee facing in terms of discipline? I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chibuye. Yes, PS.
I'll let the MD take that.
Thank you.
There comes times when you say, just chop off my head. I think this is one of them. Chair, what transpired is that there was a gentleman within the vicinity of Mpika who used to assist Tazara management to cut the trees that were overhanging at our training center. And the only compensation that was given to this gentleman was pieces of the smaller timbers. Most of the timbers that were big were sowing them for use on the line. But then when they decided that they needed to cut a lot more, they changed the process. Instead of just asking this man to do that, they decided let's do a tender, and therefore they were wrong not to follow the procedures of the tender. If they had just continued with the process they've been doing, there wouldn't have been an issue at all. But they said, let's do it like this, they should have followed it. Therefore, we did give a very stern letter to the RIGM. We have not charged anybody else because he is the man in charge, he is the chairman of the tender board, and he shouldn't have allowed that to go on. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Msumari.
Chair, what is interesting is in this transaction is that there was no money involved, right? The individual in question was paid what is good what, that was the timber. The question that follows is, was the timber quantified as to equate to the value of his labor? Was it quantified? Because this, I should believe, the timber is part of your stocks, or it had a value on the market for that officer to accept it for his labor. Was the timber that was given to this particular person quantified in view that he lacked everything according to what Honorable Chiwe has alluded to? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Msumari. MD, if you can react to that.
Thank you, Chair. The timber's value.
Yes.
There were trees, and once you cut them and you saw them, then you value add. The timber becomes a chair, the timber becomes whatever else you can make out of the timber. So timber's value. However, the agreement that they had in the past was to give this man the smaller parts of the timber. There was no quantification of how many smaller parts, but each tree that he cut, the parts that are smaller than what we need, because we needed this timber to produce slippers, and slippers have got a certain size. And any timbers that were smaller than the size of the slipper were given to him. But how many, what quantities they were has not been recorded. And like I said, our value for that was for the timber for us was ability to make big enough to make a wooden slipper for the rails. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, Honorable Mazoka.
MD, do you think that was the right direction to go?
When I started, I said that that was absolutely incorrect. It shouldn't have been that way. It shouldn't have been that way. That is why we've charged the general manager.
Chair.
Yes, Honorable Msumari.
Okay, everyone knows, I think, the value of the timber used in these rail sleepers. It's very expensive timber. I don't know what sort of a charge you meted to this manager. Maybe you can just enlighten us, because that kind of arbitrary decision, that's the more reason why the Auditor General wasn't comfortable with it, because the commercial value that could have been attached to that timber, which is very expensive on the market, could not be ascertained. What punishment, what charge did you give to this particular manager who made this arbitrary decision? Thank you.
Managing Director.
Chair, this man is a first offender. This man is a first offender, and he's one of our best guys in the organization. We did sanction him, and we did give him a warning letter. It might not be adequate, but it's very difficult to see him repeating that again. I think if such an opportunity arises in future, he will certainly follow the procedures that we put up.
Yes, thank you very much, MD. Yes, Honorable Mazoka. Yes, Honorable Chuye.
Sorry, the chair, through the chair. From my understanding, is the MD is clear that in every offense there must be procedures. That's what literally is saying. But they wrote him a warning letter. I think that was punishment enough. So that he's aware that that is not actually desired in the institution. That's my understanding, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mazoka.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just want to find out if that letter can be made available to the committee. Thank you.
It is in the attachment.
Okay.
In the appendix.
So, Honorable Mazoka, go. I think we, in the interest of time, we go to the next segment of question.
Thank you, Chair. My query is on Tazara Construction Unit, which arises from page 196 of the Auditor General's report. And if it could be explained to the committee, what other plans, apart from both governments, support the authority has been implementing to ensure that all the machines are replaced?
Thank you. Controlling Officer.
Chair, I think on this particular one, the Tazara Construction Unit will appear to have come on the tail end of things because of the priorities that the authority has right up to now in terms of getting the main line functional, getting the locomotives moving and the wagons. So in terms of prioritization, I would say that, like I said, when we do rank, the Tazara Construction Unit would appear to be at the tail end of things. But perhaps this is one of the things that the board should also look into because of the nature of work that the unit is able to undertake. Is it possible that this unit can be offloaded to the private sector? They take it up and begin to run with it? That is something, like I said, the board can look into, unless MD wants to add into.
Also, I think you've taken it quite right.
Any follow-up questions from any honorable member, or we go to the next question? They are tired. We go to the next question. Yes, Honorable Gampiongo.
Just maybe to get an understanding of what kind of works are undertaken by this construction unit.
Through my
yes, MD.
Through my PS, this construction unit, when it was put up, it would do some roads, it would do some houses, it would do some caveats, construction caveats, even construction of some huts for along the Tazara line, where we keep guards, etc., etc. Those were the kind of works that they did.
Thank you. I think we move on. Honorable Cassandra, if you can help us with the questions on page 10 on Tazara and CBU Academic Partnership Agreement.
Thank you, Chair. This is a query on page 196 of the report of the Auditor General. failure by unit to achieve its objectives. Kindly explain to the committee what other plans apart from both governments support the authority has been implementing to ensure that all the machines are replaced. Oh, that one has been
next, yes. Can the authority provide current?
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, pardon
I think
me.
what you can do, Honorable Kasando, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe you can take 3, then the last 2.
Okay. So can the authority provide current status to the committee, the therapy matters made by CBU for rental as of February 2023? The second question concerns a failure by Tazara to benefit from the agreement. What was the purpose of the agreement that was signed if you are indicating that the detailed implementation plan regarding the 100% waiver of fees was not fully discussed and thus no Tazara staff were trained? And according to the agreement, 10 Tazara staff should have been trained at 100%. Why have you agreed to have 6 staff trained instead? And lastly, when is the selection for trainers going to be completed? I submit, Chair, for now.
Thank you, Honorable Kasandwe. MD or controlling officer? The MD.
On the rentals as of February 2023, I'm aware that we did receive, after our meeting in November, CBU did promise to make a payment in January, and this payment was done. I just don't have the figure in front of me, but yes, some payments was done. You must remember that CBU is like a government entity, so it has been a little bit difficult. They are facing similar challenges like Tazara in terms of cash flow. So it has been difficult to get the CBU to effect the payments timely. Part of the challenge area was that when the CBU came to Mpika, they did some renovations and they gave us a figure of what that was. They were doing it without prior approval from us, and therefore we went into discussions with them to try and streamline the areas where we believe that those renovations were not, those funds were not put onto.
Managing Director, Honorable Kasandwe wanted to find out the payments made by CBU.
I don't have the figure in front of me, Honorable.
It was yes, not even availed to the auditors?
No, it was not availed to the auditors.
So we don't have any records even in the appendix?
There is no record in the appendix, but I can find it. I can submit it, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Kampiongo.
Chair, maybe to just press it on the controlling officer. Ideally, some of these issues we're asking you should have been cleared with the Auditor General.
Yes.
Through the processes. You know the processes that are followed when they're auditing an institution. So when issues are escalated up to the committee level, it means that you didn't make information available to the auditors. And so it's very important that when you are coming to the committee, you tie these loose ends. It's only here that you make sure that whatever you couldn't have submitted, you make available. And for the auditors to follow up also and verify, because through here we can instruct them to come and verify on this information. So it's not just a mere follow-up of questions. We are an accountability committee. And so when matters are escalated to the committee, you make sure that whatever you haven't made available to the auditors is available. That's why you are seeing us sitting here beyond the hours, is to ensure that we do the right thing as assigned to us by Parliament. I just thought I could make that understood by the controlling officer and his team.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kampiong, for that counsel. Honorable Chubia wanted to come up with another? No, it's fine. Okay. The other questions, maybe they can be repeated.
And which one?
They've not used the Tazara, the training part. The agreement of maybe training 10, but they trained only 6.
Yes, according to the agreement, Tazara was supposed to have trained 10 staff at 100%, and then according to the submission, we have only agreed to have 6 staff trained. And then the question is why?
Chair, indeed, we were supposed to be training 2. This could have been now 10 would have been trained by now. Ourselves is what 100% waiver was. What we thought 100% waiver was, we would select a Tazara employee, give them to these guys, and there would be no expenses from Tazara. They came back and said that no, that is not 100% waiver. The waiver is just on the tuition, not on the other expenses that the candidate would have to incur. And it is because of this challenge that we said, all right, can we look at having 6? It was a negotiation. We negotiated with them during the November meeting, and we said, okay, we don't want to lose all of that. Give us 6. And we asked both the general managers to give us the names, and we have the names of 3 from Zambia, 3 from Tanzania, who will be undertaking this course. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, now controlling officer from the position from the MD. Are you in a position to show this to this committee evidence of signing any MOU with the relevant statutory bodies? Was there any signing when you did the agreement with CBU?
Yes, Honorable Chairperson, that documentation is available to the extent that I think even the minutes of the meeting that was held between CBU and Tazara are part of the appendices.
Appendix, okay. Yes. Do you have a follow-up question, Honorable Kasandwe? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a question. I don't know if it has been asked. Failure to remit statutory contributions. In case that question has not been addressed, I would want to ask.
Yes.
It is appearing on page 21 of your submission, PS. And then in your submission, you did indicate that in a quest to resolve this matter, management has entered into memorandum of understanding on the settlement of the outstanding amounts. This is what you have informed this committee. Now we just want to know if there is any evidence that there is an agreement entered on the plan to pay, or any memorandum of understanding that we can look at to really indeed appreciate that this is the decision that you have entered into with those bodies that are supposed to receive these obligations. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Kasandwe. Yes, Honorable Kampiongo.
Before they respond, just a write down on Honorable Kasandwe's question. In their submission, they've also indicated that the authority was adhering to the agreement which they had initially with regards to the payment of these statutory obligations before the Chambesh incident, which then resulted into failure to generate revenue. Is there anything in the memoranda to show that you were adhering to the initial arrangement which was there, which then got breached as a result of that incident? Do you have anything to show? Because at the time of the audit, you were not able to avail evidence to this effect. Are you now ready to avail anything to that effect?
Thank you, Honorable Kampyongo, Controlling Officer. Yes, Honorable Kasandwe.
Maybe before that question is answered, just an addition to Honorable Kampyongo. According to your submission, you have informed this committee that the governments have undertaken a process of releasing 72.6 million in 2023. Now, as part of the settlement, not clearing everything. Now, we just want you to provide to this committee the status of the outstanding balance after subtracting what government has committed to clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Kasandwe. Controlling Officer.
Thank you so much for those questions. On issues of compliance and how we are performing on the MOU before the Chambeshi Bridge, I think management will come in and take that one, including the evidence of a signed MOU. But if I may speak to the 72.6 million that has been released by government, in principle, this is the full amount of, what's the word? Pension between NAPSA and ZISC. So government has released 50 million towards ZISC, and they've released 22 million towards NAPSA. Now, when you look at the table that was done by the Auditor General, you actually notice that the amounts are much higher. That is because for NAPSA, there are penalties that were being charged for the late payment on that, and that would explain the difference. But in terms of the principal itself, that has been paid. And for ZISC, the difference is based on the actuarial assessment that was done between the actual payment that are supposed to be done and what the people that went to do the assessment actually came up with. That's where the differences are coming from. So with NAPSA, I think that would be an issue of negotiation to see if they can indeed waiver the penalties, because the principal has been paid. And for ZISC as well, it's an issue of looking at how the assessment was actually done to come up with the figure that is in the book. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Controlling Officer. MD, you are coming in for the other questions.
Thank you, ma'am. FM, can you please answer those ones?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Well, I think it's true that we owed a lot of money to these statutory institutions. And then in terms of mitigating that, we thought we should be able to enter into agreements, what you call agreements to pay. So for NAPSA, we did enter into an agreement to pay. We entered with them that would be paying $40,000 every month. And then later on, this was lifted to about 60,000. However, we started paying, the agreement we entered with NAPSA was about almost like, before the Chambeshi Bridge, it was almost like a year we had been paying prior to that. However, when the accident happened, the last payment that we made was in March 2021. No, May 2021. And then we wrote to NAPSA to advise them that, okay, I think from now onwards, we are basically requesting that can you suspend this, because our expected inflows will actually not be sufficient enough to be able to meet this obligation. However, we are promising that once the bridge is completed, we'll be able to revert to that. I think the documentation is there. I'm not just sure if we have it in the addendum, but the letters that we wrote to both NAPSA and NSSF requesting them that in the interim would request that we suspend the payments because of the cash flow challenges that we're having. In terms of ZISC, yes, because of the actuarial assessment, I think the figures are quite high, but as the chair, as my peers have said, we'll be able to sit with them and see how we can mitigate that. It is both institutions in Tanzania and Zambia. In Tanzania, we have what you call National Social Security Fund. We owe them, and we have an agreement with them where we are paying. Some documentation was provided, but I think they were not included in the documentation. But we can make that available to the House, where we had entered into an agreement where we'll be paying at least 200 million shillings. And then also there's another statutory body which is called PSSSF, because I think in Tanzania they did split the two. NSSF belongs to private enterprises. PSSF is for parastatals. So even there we were also servicing the requirements. So yes, we were servicing, but unfortunately after the Chambeshi bridge, our cash flows collapsed, and we informed all our creditors that effective, I think that was October 2022, we will not be able to honor this because of our cash flow challenges. And these letters were actually given to the relevant institutions. I submit.
Thank you very much, FM. Financial Manager? Yes. Yes, Honorable Kasandwe, you want to come up with a follow-up question?
Sorry, I know that time is not with us.
No, you.
And Chair, let me apologize to take you back. I have one question that I want to ask concerning of expenditure without board approval. That's why I'm apologizing for taking the committee backwards. But there's just one aspect which has attracted my attention. We can go to page 5 of the submission, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. On the policy to adjust salaries when the currency depreciates. They have submitted that it is the authority's policy to adjust the local currency salaries whenever one local currency depreciates by 20% or more to maintain the parity. It's just in the same token. PS, what happens if the currency appreciates more than 20%? It's the same logic. I just want to find out what happens to people's salaries. I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kasandwe. That is very viable. Controlling Officer.
Chair, I'm trying to remember the labor laws. But I think here in Zambia, employers are not allowed to reduce conditions below what an employee currently enjoys. So if there is a gain in that sense, as asked by Honorable Kasandwe, that becomes a benefit to the employee. I wish to submit.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chibuye, in the interest of time, can you take up the final question? Yes, Honorable Msumali.
Before Honorable Chibuye ask the last question, I think we are dealing with figures here, and I'm sure the Auditor General will be interested in the actual figure. The question that was asked was how much is accruing as of now to these statutory bodies. And then financial manager there was giving actually he just gave a suspense figure that's quite a lot of money. But in your table here, the figures are specified in both the Zambian kwacha and the Tanzanian shillings. I would advise maybe if they can provide the Auditor General with the actual figures by revisiting what has been paid and what is remaining.
Thank you, Honorable Sumari. Yes, can you react to that?
We are well guided, Honorable Chairperson. I think, like I did indicate during the process of reconciliation, to take off what has been paid by government, the other figures would be made available.
Auditor General's office, you take note of that? Yeah, thank you. Yes, Honorable.
Maybe also just to say there were some information that was not available.
Yes.
I think which they can combine to make sure that they avail to the Auditor General.
Thank you. Honorable Chibuya, take up the final question.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Controlling officer, it is now evident that the major challenges the authority is facing inter-area include poor working capital, high operations costs, and uncertainty with regard to the provisions of financial support from the shareholders and the Zambian government in particular. What strategies or measures does the authority intend to implement to ensure viability and sustained profitability of the authority so that it contributes to the economic affairs of both Tanzania and Zambia when the revitalization plan and recapitalizations are implemented? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chibuye. Controlling officer.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson. As we sit, the board does have an instruction, sorry, not the board, management does have instructions from the board to prepare a short-term plan for the survival of Tazara, because the ministry is cognizant of the fact that given the directives that were given by the council, that we begin the process of looking for a concessionaire to come and run Tazara on our behalf. That might take time. But what happens between now and then, we actually need to ensure that Tazara remains afloat, and if anything, Tazara begins to improve if we can. And therefore, management was tasked that within the next 1 month, they should come up with a short-term plan that will bring out the measures which the committee actually want to hear in terms of how we move the institution forward up to the point where we'll get the concession in place. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Controlling officer, yes, Honorable Kampiongo.
It's just a very interesting one. Do we see Tazara running on, electrical rail lines, the trains, anytime soon?
Yes.
That injection, are we expecting the same old rail lines that we have had, a model which now don't have even the spares? What assurance do you give to the committee in terms of this PPP you are going to?
Chair, I think that's the modern way that things are going. But I don't want to mislead the committee by giving an assurance that we might not be able to meet. Because you'll find that if cargo, for example, I'll give an example of what the speed limits on road are. You have speed limits of up to 80 kilometers per hour. And if we could move or we could rehabilitate our rail line to the extent that the goods train are also able to achieve that speed, then you'll find that both the rail and the road transport would be at par. So in that respect, then what would actually determine which mode of transport the bulk movers will want to move with are the rates that would be applicable. And the rail actually would win because of the economies of scale. But definitely, if you look at the initiatives that are taking place and they see what initiatives our neighboring countries are doing, like Tanzania themselves, they've come up with a new rail line, which they want to extend all the way to DRC. And this is actually running on, it's actually electrical. So that is something that we need to be aware of, even as we are looking at how best to revitalize the Tazara. I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, Controlling Officer. So Tanzania is doing better than Zambia?
Well, as things are, they are doing fine.
We can't copy from them?
I think that's the beauty with these things, Chair. They are best practices where you can go out and see how your friends are actually doing. Right now, the way to go is what they are calling SGR, which is the standard gauge rail. Because on standard gauge, which is what the Tanzanians have done between Dar es Salaam heading towards the DRC. So for that one, you'll find that for passenger movement, the speeds are going up to 160 kilometers per hour.
Okay.
While for goods, the speeds are actually going up to 120 kilometers per hour. And if we could do the Tazara up to that, I think that for me would actually become a deal clincher. And that would even help to move the bulk cargo that we have been talking about, which is damaging our roads, from the road back to the rail. I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, Controlling Officer. I wouldn't want to bother you with a lot of questions, because I remember in the 80s, Tazara was, in the early 80s, Tazara. Auditor General's Office, do you have any comments to make before I can invite the internal? Okay, Managing Controlling Officer. We can start with the Managing Director. Any closing remarks? And then we come to the FM and then the PS. Then we can conclude.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've heard the guidance. We accept the guidance that has been given to us. We will ensure that going forward, we work on those shortfalls that have been brought to our attention. And I'm sure that when the Auditor General comes next, they will find all these issues eliminated. Maybe they'll come up with new ones, but these ones that they brought.
Thank you very much, Managing Director. Auditor General, they've promised. Yeah, even those run-down infrastructure, especially between Kapiri and Mkushi, I see a lot of your buildings running down, you know. It pains me. Where I think at the beginning they had the use why they came up with such structures. Yes, Financial Manager, any remarks?
Okay, I think for me, it is probably just on a general sort of comment.
Yes.
I think from what submissions which my permanent secretary has made, and especially the examples that he has given, where Tanzania is developing its
yes,
railway
and we are behind.
I would believe that the members of parliament who are here, even when they go into parliament, they'll be able to support so that we move forward on our rails. Because where we are going, if we don't modernize, we don't improve the Tazara, I think we'll lose most of the benefits that we've accrued so far. So to me, it's an eye-opener. I'm very thankful for the committee's contributions and the directives given. Thank you.
Thank you very much. SPS, your last comments?
Very few words, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Committee members. Just to thank the committee for the guidance that has been given. I wish to state that we always approach these audits with an open mind, knowing that they are here to help us identify where we have the gaps in our control environment. And I think our failure would be seen in us not being able to respond to these gaps that have been identified. So I can only assure the committee that whatever has been brought out as gaps in the control environment as far as Tazara is concerned, we'll ensure that those are worked on, and also try to be proactive in looking at what are other areas we need to mitigate, so that we can assure the committee on issues of transparency and accountability in the management of Tazara. And your guidance, Honorable Kampyongo, is well noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Permanent Secretary and your team, for coming. I'm sure now we have come to the end of our sitting. I'm withdrawing the immunity bestowed upon you. I'm sure you are going to enjoy the other immunities where you are going as PS, as the financial manager, as managing director. But as at now, I'm withdrawing. So whatever you are going to say, you are going to be on your own. Thank you very much for coming, and God bless you. And we are looking forward to see Tazara being revived so that we can also compete. There are also
I always knew that I was adopted. Mama.
Excuse us.